Okay, so let's jump right in. We're looking at a pretty major development here.
Yeah, this new minerals deal between the U.S. and Ukraine.
Exactly. Signed just Wednesday, May 1st, 2025, over in Washington.
And the main point really is how they're going to share profits and royalties.
From future mineral sales, right?
Yeah.
Including those rare earths everyone talks about.
Those are vital, for so much tech, the things you use every single day, phones, but also advanced military stuff.
So this sharing agreement, it's got some big financial and, well, geopolitical weight behind it for you to think about.
Definitely.
Okay, let's break down the U.S. perspective first. The Trump administration has suggested this is linked to repaying aid.
That's the line, yeah. They're talking about helping recoup that pretty massive sum. What is it, $175 billion?
Yeah, an estimated $175 billion in aid provided since the war started. So it sounds like a big financial driver is, offsetting those costs.
It certainly seems that way. I mean, with that amount of aid, looking for ways to potentially get some back makes a certain kind of sense.
So this deal, it creates a potential future income stream.
Exactly. Something the U.S. hopes will, balance the books a bit on those expenses, while also, as they put it, encouraging more investment in Ukraine's defense and eventually reconstruction.
Right. Okay, now let's flip to the Ukrainian side. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, he's provided some specifics.
He has. He talked about how the fund would actually work, said the profits would be split evenly, 50-50.
50-50,
Yeah.
Okay. And what about control?
Equal voting rights. That was a key point he made. Both the U.S. and Ukraine get an equal say in managing the fund.
That idea of equal partnership seems, well, pretty significant, at least on paper.
It is. And Shmyhal also really stressed that this whole agreement, it's only for new investments.
Okay. Not touching existing operations.
Correct. Just new money coming into Ukraine's mineral sector. So it looks like they're trying to, attract fresh capital, spur development.
Makes sense. But there's a catch, isn't there? This isn't quite across the finish line yet.
That's a really important point. It still needs the green light from Ukraine's parliament, the Verkhovna Rada.
So signed by the leaders, but not fully ratified.
Exactly. That parliamentary approval, it's a real hurdle. There's definitely some uncertainty there.
Internal politics in Ukraine could still derail this.
Oh, absolutely. You know how these things go. An agreement between governments still has to pass through the legislative process to become, well, actual law.
Okay, so something to keep an eye on. Now, this whole thing hasn't gone unnoticed, particularly by Russia.
No, definitely not. Dmitry Medvedev, he's the deputy chairman of Russia's Security Council. He's already weighed in pretty forcefully.
And what's his take? How does Moscow see this?
Well, Medvedev's interpretation is quite stark. He basically sees it as President Trump forcing Kyiv's hand.
Forcing them how?
Forcing them to use their mineral wealth as collateral or payment for future American military aid.
So less of a partnership, more of a transaction.
That's his framing. He paints it as the U.S. getting special access to Ukraine's natural resources and Ukraine paying with, and this is his quote, its national wealth of a disappearing country.
Wow. That's blunt.
Yeah.
Really frames Ukraine as vulnerable and the U.S. is opportunistic.
Extremely blunt. Yeah, it really shows the deep suspicion there about U.S. intentions. And it pushes that narrative of Ukraine being, exploited. That disappearing country bit is also, well, quite telling about Russia's view.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so adding another piece to this puzzle, there's a report from the Kiev Post.
Right, citing diplomatic sources. What did they report?
They said the Trump administration has told Congress it plans to approve exporting defense items to Ukraine. Direct commercial sales. $50 million or more.
And that would be the first time since Trump returned to office.
Apparently so. But we should add a caveat here. Reuters couldn't immediately confirm this report.
Okay, so potentially significant, but needs verification. Still, if it is true, that's another layer for you to consider. Well, you'd have this economic link, the minerals deal, happening alongside potentially more direct arms sales. It strengthens the ties, maybe.
Or creates more dependency.
That's the question, isn't it? Does this mix of military support and economic investment make the partnership stronger, more resilient, or does it, tie Ukraine's hands in new ways?
Interesting angle. And we're also hearing from
a former advisor. His view is that this minerals deal actually makes things harder for Russia.
Harder how? In terms of peace talks.
Exactly. He thinks that because the U.S. now has this sort of resource-backed stake in Ukraine, It'll see itself more like a co-owner,
A co.
his term. And because of that, the U.S. will likely become even more firmly pro-Ukrainian in any negotiations, less flexible from Moscow's point of view.
So this economic deal could directly impact the diplomacy around ending the conflict.
It really could. It adds another complex layer to the whole dynamic.
Which brings us to the broader picture, right? U.S., Russia, Ukraine relations, the prospects for talks. It all seems pretty tangled.
It does. You've got the U.S. saying they're frustrated by the lack of progress. Russia says, we're ready to talk, but it's complicated.
Ukraine.
Ukraine's position has been pushing for an immediate ceasefire for at least 30 days or so as a starting point.
So very different perspectives and priorities all around. You have the U.S. angle, repayment, investment.
Then Ukraine emphasizing this, supposed equal partnership on managing future resources.
And Russia seeing it as basically forced payment and a sign the U.S. is digging in deeper.
Exactly. It really highlights this kind of unusual model for aid in a conflict zone, doesn't it? Tying assistance to future resource extraction.
Yeah. It definitely makes you wonder about the long-term effects. What does it mean when aid is linked so directly to a country's physical assets?
Right. How does that change the relationship between the donor and the recipient? Does this payment model, as some see it, signal a shift in how international support works in these long, drawn-out conflicts?
And what other consequences, maybe ones nobody's foreseeing yet, could pop up down the line from these kinds of deals?
A lot to think about there. It certainly complicates an already incredibly complex situation.